Hello, beautiful people. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today, albeit virtually. Please know that I share in your excitement of all the beauty, joy, and art that you will be viewing today. Ntozake Sange's creation of the Koryo poem happened in the 1970s during the Black Arts Movement. This was a pivotal time for Black artists in America because we were using our voices instrumentally through music, poetry, dance, song, in ways that we haven't before. The difference was that we were speaking to how proud we were to be wearing our skin, how proud we were to be Black in America, in a space where we didn't feel wanted and we didn't feel like we had a place. Ntozake Sange took the form of theater, but reinvented it. Instead of writing the plays first, she first went into her body. She created movement first, and then she added words. This was her secret ingredient to creating something that was deep and felt for audiences who were Black and didn't feel, like I said before, they had a place. She gave them a space that they felt safe in. Koryo poetry is important to me for this reason. I use it as a way to create space for audience members to first be embodied, to feel it, and not just be witnessing it. Koryo poetry has also become a ritual for me. I believe that the first time we hear a story, we don't get all the details. What's left with us, that residue, is what is important. I created Koryo poems in order for audiences to use my films as rituals, to watch it again and again and again, and every time embody something new. The hybridity of Koryo poetry is what I love about it the most. The thread that you see underlining the stories is that I'm playing with language. I'm playing with poetry as its own language. I'm playing with the visuals, the duality of visuals that you see as its own language. I'm also pulling from different sources. Some primary sources for me are dream worlds. I'm a vivid dreamer. I've always had very lucid dreams as a child. And many of these dreams I learned in conversation with my grandmother were actually things that happened to my family members. And so integrating these different sources through the visuals, through the music, most of them were written. One song is a remix of Betty Davis's They Say I'm Different, hearkening back to the 1960s, where Black women were entering the genre of rock and funk in a way that was Afrofuturistic in their clothes and in their tonality. And I use this as a source in order to speak to the newness that is happening, the something different, the something else that is happening within our protagonist, Sid. I also integrate personal family stories that my grandmother did tell me, confirming my dreams, and also more detailing that helped me understand more about my relationship with my mother and my relationship to my grandmother. So there's also this intergenerational conversation that's happening that's a part of this immersive experience. The thesis of Mama Rose really is in the survival of Black queer folks. As someone who is Black and queer and femme, growing up in a very conservative household in the 1980s, there wasn't a lot of room for me to be myself fully. And there were some opacities that happened naturally. And I've always been curious about what those opacities look like for other Black queer folks growing up. In what ways were we allowed to live fully as ourselves, and what ways do we need to conceal? This also coincides as intersectionality being Black in America, as I spoke to earlier. There are ways that we use our Blackness to be opaque and to hide certain things about ourselves. And then there are ways that when we are amongst those that we feel comfortable with, that we are able to release and fully be ourselves. And there is a term called Black joy that lives into this space of understanding that we are both in a space of thriving and surviving at the same time. And that these two worlds can sometimes coexist, but a lot of times we are coping. We are just getting through the day. We are just understanding that there are ways that we can be in public and ways that we can't. And so these modes of survival are stories that are through lines through Mama Rose. And one story in particular is a folklore. I use mythology and folklores a lot in my projects because I believe that mythology speaks to stories that are true and untrue at the same time, which I believe oral history does the same thing, that we can't always remember everything, but there's that stickiness that I talked about earlier that remains with us. I believe that folklores have the same capacity. In the folklore, The People Who Could Fly, it was actually a story that comes from the Geechee Island people where, as the story goes, Africans were enslaved and brought over to America, to the islands, the Geechee Islands, and knowing that they were going to be forced into labor after engaging in the horrors that happen on board for months at a time, where they were living in inhumane conditions. They exited the ship, looked at what was ahead of them, and turned around and decided to go back into mommy water, back into the ocean, choosing freedom over enslavement. Now, this story turned into The People Who Could Fly, speaking to the fact that they took their own agency over the situation and made a decision that whatever was lying ahead could not be any better than internal freedom. And so this story speaks to the ability to take situations into your own hands. As we have been oppressed as African Americans, we have learned how to take matters into our own hands and turn the situation around. We learn how to make lemonade out of lemons, you know? And so in this way, you see the protagonist Sid in a situation where they don't feel as comfortable with their mother being their full selves, but they can be their full selves with their best friend, Deuces. They can learn more about what it means to be a Black queer person from Mama Rose, who I imagine as a trans woman. So these stories are all integrated together to speak to how we are both surviving and thriving at the same time, and finding moments of joy where it seems impossible. So speaking into the possibilities. I love this question and how it involves the master clock. I have spent a lot of time with indigenous leaders who speak to the fact that Western time is very different than indigenous time. Indigenous time is nonlinear. And when I think about healing, which is also at the center of resilience, is at the center of surviving and thriving, healing is nonlinear. We have been made to think that you heal from something and that's it. You never have to return back to it. That is false. I know from experience, and I'm sure many of you have learned that sometimes you can heal from things, but there's still triggers. And it returns you right back to where you once were, even if it's in a different situation. As I was writing Mama Rose, because some of this is so personal to me, I was triggered and I was taken back to being 16 and trying to learn how to speak to my mother, or try to learn how to speak to the parts of me that I didn't understand and didn't have a model for. So in this way, I created Mama Rose to be nonlinear, by breaking it up into parts where sometimes we are hearing the story through song. Sometimes we are hearing the story through poetry. And sometimes we are hearing these internal dialogues and external dialogues that Sid has with other people. All of this is a part of hearkening back to the fact that time happens in a way that we are inside and outside of it. It is not linear. We are always returning to ourselves in different ways, and in different mediums and different modes. And that's how we grow. That's how we learn who we are as human. And so allowing the story to take place in this way kind of breaks us out of the framework of there has to be a finality, there has to be a happy ending. Because even at the ending, I'm trying to give us a possibility that there's something something new is going to take place. And I don't even know what it is, but I'm excited about it. And I hope that you are excited about it too. Mama Rose is an Afrofuturist trippy experience, and that is the way that it should be engaged. Do not worry about trying to follow through lines. Just experience it, sit with it, engage with it. Feel where in your body things come up for you. Afterwards, if you have time, write those things down. Even though this is part of my journey, I believe that this is part of the human experience, and understanding our relationships interpersonally and internally, understanding who we are becoming, and understanding that the possibilities are endless. I hope you enjoy Mama Rose, and I'm so excited to hear about any of your reactions. Please don't hesitate to contact me after the show. Thank you.